Yes, sir. Shall we start? Vignesh, sir. Vignesh, sir. Yes, sir. Shall we start? Okay. Okay, sir. Okay. Okay. Sir. Good morning to all. On behalf of St. Mother Teresa Engineering College, it is an honor and privilege for me to welcome you all to this live webinar. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our distinguished resource person, Dr. T. Sendilkumar sir, who is going to give presentation on deep learning and data visualization. He is currently working as an associate professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at Amrita School of Engineering, Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham University, Coimbatore. He has completed his BTech at Sethu Institute of Technology, Madurai, and then completed his MTech in Distributed Computing System at Pondicherry Engineering College, Pondicherry. He has completed his PhD in Information and Communication Engineering from Anna University, Chennai. His area of interest includes video surveillance, deep learning, cloud computing, software engineering, video processing, wireless sensor networks, big data computing, embedded automation. He has received appreciation in Indian Express for agent-based programming for banking domain. He has publication in 9 national conferences, 12 international conferences, 14 international journals, and 2 edited book chapters. He has 19 publications in Scopus Index journals. He has published a book on C++. He is a reviewer of Elsewhere Computers and Electrical Engineering journal IEEE Access, Indus Science, International Journal of Intelligent Information System, IGI Global, Springer Data Analysis, International Institute of Engineers Journal, Journal of Electronics Imaging, Computer Modeling in Engineering and Sciences, IGI Global Publishers, Soft Computing, Journal of Assistive Technology, Soft Computing, International Journal of Computational Medicine and Healthcare, Springer Soft Computing. He is guiding PhD scholar with Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham in the area of video analysis, deep learning, signal processing. He teaches courses in video processing, video analytics, distributed system, multidimensional signal processing. He has involved himself in developing competency area of programming like MATLAB, NS2, JIST, .NET, Android, Hadoop, OpenCV, Spark, deep learning tools, embedded automation. He has been working with Amrita Vishwa Vidyapeetham, Coimbatore since 2001. He is a part of funded projects with IBM, DST, and Ministry of Tribal Affairs. With these words, I cordially welcome our esteemed resource person, Dr. T. Senthil Kumar, sir. Welcome you, sir.
So, ma'am, good morning. Thank you for the introduction. So it's a pleasure to share a session and talk to you all on deep learning and data visualization. Thanks to Karpavalli ma'am, thanks to Vignesh sir, and thanks to the team from the English department for making the necessary arrangements to host the session. And we will now start with the session delivery. Hope I'm audible to everybody.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay.
We can hear your voice, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Now, are you able to see the slides, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay. So, members who are listening to the session, I am T. Senthil Kumar. Thank you, sir. I'm T. Senthil Kumar. Work with the Amrita School of Engineering Computer Science Department in Coimbatore campus. So, I'm going to share a discussion on deep learning and data visualization. So in my area of interest, this is my area which I've been working for last 3 to 4 years. And whatever I'm presenting, I keep my compliments to my bachelor students, master students in engineering here in Amrita, and my PhD scholars. So I have 5 PhD scholars, out of which 3 of them work on image and video data with deep learning, and 2 of them work on networks and behavioral security in deep learning. And thanks to my industry connects, because whenever there is a problem that we want to visualize, then the industry people sometimes work on the similar problem and they guide us. So thanks to my industry connects with Intel, HCL, my good friends there. So with this, we'll take through to the session. So the first question for everybody would be like, what is deep learning? Why everybody talks about deep learning every day today? And what is this buzzword becoming so interesting? See, whenever you have something in front of you, the first question is like, what do you want to understand from the data that you see? For example, let's take you walk on the road, you see somebody walking on the road, the data that you visualize is a human. Your next question is like, that person is known to you or not? So yeah, information that you perceive always gives you some sort of thinking capability based on which you reason and predict and say, this is what you have understood from the information. For example, you walk on the road, you see a person, it could be a friend, it could be your enemy, it could be a person whom you have met 10 years back and so on. So when we want to make such capabilities build onto system, it needs something called as knowledge. So the first question that always comes up is like, how do you get knowledge? So knowledge comes from the data. So you need data to build knowledge. So people always say the more the amount of data, the more you are knowledgeable. For example, you go back to yourself. Let's take you, ask yourself, were you intelligent in the school days? You would say, I was less intelligent when I started my LKG. And you would say that I became more intelligent when I finished my 12th standard. So the knowledge that you gain over the years has different representation, and it is very complex to understand how the knowledge is stored in the human memory. But all we want is we want to build systems which actually is close to the human thinking capabilities and predict, saying that this is what I'm able to understand from the knowledge. Now, what you see in the diagram in the left side, you can see the 3 keywords. One is artificial intelligence, second is machine learning, and third is deep learning. So request to all the participants, as you start listening to my session, whatever questions you have, you can type your questions and put it to the message. At the end, I will answer to all the questions as much as possible, as I know. Now, let's come to these keywords, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and next is deep learning. So the common definition of artificial intelligence is to build systems in the way in which human beings think. So people always call it to the common definition, saying it's a way in which computers think in the way in which human beings think. When you come to machine learning, we say that, yes, we also want to build systems like that. When we come to deep learning, we say we want to build systems which is more better compared to what we have come in machine learning. Now, today's trend is more like, given a problem, how do you use artificial intelligence as a reasoning to solve deep learning based models that you develop? That's a current trend that is going on. We'll come to that as we move on. Now, for all these three keywords, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and deep learning, what I would always put up to everybody is a keyword called as uncertainty. So what is uncertainty is a data that you have, if it is going to be uncertain, then it presents a lot of complexity to predict. Let's see like this. Let's take you have a temperature of value X, and that temperature is remaining the same for last 2 days. You go to the doctor in the third day and say, I'm running with a temperature of X. The doctor will say, this is my medicine, you take the medicine. Now, once you take the medicine, then let's take the temperature is not at X, it is slightly increasing and then decreasing. Then again, you go to the doctor and say the temperature is keeping on increasing or either it's decreasing. Now it is an uncertain situation. Why the temperature is increasing? Because of the medicine, or is it because the person is having some other type of fever? So going behind the data to learn more about the data always needs more of reasoning, more of rule building process. So systems always say that you can go for rule-based systems. So what I'm keeping you before as a first keyword is rule-based systems. Example of rule-based systems are decision trees, are best examples of rule-based systems. Now, what happens to the next stage is now you talk about fever that people get because of COVID. All of us know what is COVID right now, right? So you say I'm running out of a fever. Now there is a lot of questions why the fever is coming, and there is no answers when the fever will get reduced for the person. So uncertainty in the data is very complex. So people are trying to find out how to know the trend of the COVID, how the fever can increase or decrease with the coming days. So systems are becoming complex. So what I'm presenting you is uncertainty of the data is a buzzword or the keyword for you to know why I'm going for machine learning or deep learning. So whenever you build systems, if your uncertainty is going to be very high, you need to go for deep learning. Like for example, you build a model for predicting the COVID cases, right? Uncertainty is very high. So there you can go for deep learning. Now let's come to the bottom part of the slide. What you see is a diagrammatic representation of a neural network. So there is a lot of inputs. Inputs are understood as I1 to IN. Each input has a weight understood as W1 to WN. And what we do is like we multiply the inputs with the weights. That means I into W. Summed up, what you see is X. We check whether X is greater than the threshold. If it is greater than the threshold, based on it, we classify it to a specific class. So what's the next keyword I'm keeping before you is something called as class. So a neural network says, given a set of inputs with a set of weights that are being assigned, the neural network will be able to classify to a respective class. Now what you see in the right side is a model for deep learning. Now if you see into the deep learning model, what happens is there is a set of inputs which are coming in the neurons. These inputs are fed to the other set of layers. Now, if you look at what is the keyword of layer, when you come to neural network also, we have the concept of hidden layers. But here, if you can see, first part that you see in a deep learning is what is called as the input layer. And second part that you see is hidden layer. And next part, what you see is again hidden layers. So the next difference for you to understand is a deep learning will have more than one level of hidden layers. So what is the advantage of hidden layer? A hidden layer will allow you to provide a level of abstraction for learning the given input data. So if you ask how many hidden layers can you have, the answer would be is the more the amount of hidden layers, the better the amount of learning. So a deep learning says, given a data to the input layer with more amount of hidden layers, it is able to classify it with the respective output. Now, this slide is for you to understand a quick difference between AI, ML, and DL. As I told you, the keyword is going to be uncertainty. If the uncertainty is going to be high, you can go for deep learning. If the uncertainty is less, you can go for machine learning. If the uncertainty can be always predicted, then you can go for artificial intelligence. Now, right side, what you see is a set of keywords called as labeled data. So what is this labeled data? Now, what we see on the screen is the understanding with respect to data. Are you able to see the browser, sir, madam?
Yes, Hello? Sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now, if you ask yourself what is data, there are many ways to look. Thank you, sir. There are many ways to look at data. The first thing would be somebody would say, I want to work on images. Okay, do I have a data? Example for that is Caltech. This data set, why I'm keeping for discussion is this data set is very interesting because for every object in this data set, they have 360-degree view of the same object. That means if you have a chair, you have 360-degree images. That means at every 1 degree image, there is an image for your reference. So what you have is more amount of data. So Caltech is one data set for you for images. If somebody says I want to work on medical, then answer would be now the challenge is about COVID data set. So people will suggest that you can go for a COVID data set. COVID data set link I'm sharing you for your reference. One second. Okay. So COVID data set is very interesting because the data is very complex. And if you ask what is complexity, there is not a possibility for you to learn the trend. Like you ask yourself what was COVID cases in any place in India, for example, Tamil Nadu, nobody would have suggested that we might get a count what we see yesterday or today. So the uncertainty is very high. So COVID is very good data set for analysis. Then this is another website data I'm keeping for you for outlier data set analysis. What is outlier is, see, whenever we say that I have got a data for me to predict or classify, the question would be like what you want to find. The people will say that I want to work on outliers on the data, right? Outliers are more correspondent to the anomalies of the given data also. So this is a very good data set for you to work on outliers, which is Stony Brook data. The interesting thing is if you scroll the URL down, you can see more different type of data sets they would have presented. They would present you data sets on time series. They would present you data sets with respect to images, videos, and so on. So if your project or your research is more related to this, please have a look at this link also. So this is some examples of data sets. Now, when you are given a data set, your data set may be anything like this, or it might be a data set which comes as a CSV file. Like for example, if you look at this data set, you can see a lot of columns. Each column here corresponds to something called as features. If you ask how many features is there, if you scroll for a particular row, you can say that I have this many features for me to analyze. Now, given a set of data which is understood as features, now the challenge for all of us is what is the challenge in this data first? What can be the challenges? For example, if you look at the first feature for your information, the first feature as such carries a numerical value. The numerical value is a whole value. Whereas when you come to the second feature, you can see that the value is not a whole value, but it's having a decimal component. Whereas if you come down to the next columns, you can see the fifth column is having a value which is negative. So data as such will give you a lot of challenges. First is you need to work on data which can be whole values like this, or decimal values like this, or you'll have to work on negative values like this, or you will have to work on columns of data which is neither numbers, but it will be just character, or it will be strings like this. So data will give you a lot of challenges. So the first thing that I'm keeping for you is feature. What is feature? Every single column in a data is called as a feature. The second thing for your understanding is feature vector. What is feature vector? Is group of features. If I got 5 features, all these 5 or 6 features together, I can say it's called as a feature vector. Now, when I want to describe about my data, I will say something called as dimension. What is dimension? Is number of features minus 1. If I have n columns in my data, n minus 1 will give me the dimension of the data, right? So the third keyword for you is dimension. Dimension corresponds to number of features minus 1. For every data, it is not required that I will take all the data for my analysis. For example, if I ask to everybody, what is the percentage of a student? You will just say roll number, comma percentage. That means you are not interested in saying about the marks. If I ask you like give the performance of the student, you would say roll number, subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, subject 4, subject 5. There are 5 subjects with the marks. That means the data is available like this, like what you see in the screen. But what the user wants, based on it, the data will be given based on the question. Now, certain data can be directly answered. For example, give me the student performance, right? Give me the student average. You would say I've created a feature called as average. Now, this is very little easy. But somebody asks you a question saying that, okay, your percentage is 70. What is the percentage that you'll get in the next semester? Then people will say that I don't have an answer. But if you want to build a model for that, that is where you talk about something called as prediction. Okay? So given some data for reference, we want to predict the data for the future. This is called as prediction. So what are the keywords that you have learned? One is feature. The next is feature vector. That means every row is basically a feature vector. Third is dimension. That is number of features minus 1. Fourth one I'm keeping left for your learning is called as prediction. Now prediction, let's take through with an example. Now this is the data available. In every data, you will have to go to the last column of the data and see whether there is a keyword called as class. That means whether there is a column called as class. The class will give you a value. For example, if you look at these values, you see some values as zeros. Suppose I see a value as 0, 1, 0, 1. That means that class values are 0 and 1. It is a binary class problem because there are two class label. Class label, one class label is 0, another class label is 1. Suppose I give like this, 0, 1, 2. Then that means there are three classes, 0, 1 and 2. So given a feature or given a set of features, we want to build a model which will classify the data to a respective class. So the classification can be either a binary classification like what you see, 0 and 1, or it can be a multi-class like what you see, which is 0, 1 and 2. So every problem starts with a binary classification and becomes a multi-class problem. But there is one more keyword which people talk about, which is called as single class. See, as such, when you talk about classification, we can take through an example of a medical scenario. You go to a doctor. The doctor asks you, do you have a fever? So your answer is yes or no. That means it says whether you have a fever or not have a fever. The doctor asks you like, do you have a malaria fever or you have a dengue fever? With your knowledge, if you say that, yes, I have a dengue fever, right? With what I have as symptoms, I feel that I have a dengue fever. Then that means you have two classes in your knowledge. One is called as dengue fever and next is malaria fever. Let's say you go to a doctor now and say, sir, I know it is not a malaria fever nor a dengue fever. I feel that I have a problem of COVID as a symptom. Then you know about three types of these fevers. One would be a malaria, second is a dengue, and third is you are trying to give an inference to the doctor that it can be a COVID also, right? So a classification starts with a knowledge built on what you learn, and it can keep on increasing. This is where people usually ask a question. I don't have data. My data is very small. Can I apply deep learning? Yes, you can apply deep learning. There is no ground truth inference saying that deep learning is only for large data. But suggestion is, if you can have a data as larger data, you can bring lot of inferences from the data. So the classification accuracy will be very high, right? Now, here comes the keyword of something called as temporal. See, when you talk about a stock market data, a stock market data is for a day. Let's take today morning. If you look at a stock market record, it would start with one record, for example, saying a particular company share is this value. Now, as the time increases from 9 o'clock, 9 to 10, 10 to 11 and so on, millions of people are trying to hit the stock market. Either they go for a purchase or a selling or they go for an auction, for example, I'm saying. So every individual request coming from the user is going to make the data larger. So that is where you talk about temporal aspect. So a data is not going to be static. A data is going to be dynamic. So a data is not going to be a static model. A data can be a real-time data. So when the data is real-time, you need to go for algorithms which are based on real-time. For example, you say I'm going for a k-means. People suggest that go for a real-time k-means if your data is real-time based. Now, let's come to the next keyword for your knowledge. Next keyword is what I'm keeping for your inferences, something called as learning algorithms. Generally, there are two types of learning. One is called as unsupervised learning, and next is supervised learning. Let's take it like this. I have a data, but I don't have a class label at all. Okay, that means I want to first classify this data to a respective class. I want to classify it as either 0 or 1. This falls under something called as unsupervised learning. That means data is there is no class. I use some algorithms to first classify the data. This is completely an unsupervised learning. Now, what is an example of an unsupervised learning algorithm? K-means cluster. So K-means is the best algorithm for unsupervised learning. So using K-means, I am able to classify this data as class labels as 0, 1. Now it is classified. Now the next question somebody would ask is, what is a class for this? Now, if you are given a data where there is some class label values and you need to find a class label for the rest of the rows, then you have to go for supervised learning. Okay. So example of a supervised learning is A nearest neighbor. For example, I am showing you a fourth column, fourth row, where the class label is not available. I want to find the class label for this. Right? I want to find the class label for this. Now, how do I find the class label value? I can go for a supervised learning. Example of a supervised learning is K nearest neighbor. Okay. So I given you two keywords. One is called as unsupervised learning and next is called as supervised learning. The third one is something called as boosting classifiers. Wherever you are interested in minimizing the outliers, you can go for boosting classifiers. Example of boosting classifier is AdaBoost classifier. Now let's come back. Now, if you have a data like this, all of you know what is data right now. If you have a data like this, then the next question would be like, given data, if the data is going to have characters and string, can I handle it? Generally, if you run through an algorithm, they will work with mathematical formulas. So I want to find the difference of two columns. All of us will agree that I cannot find the difference of these two columns because one is going to be in string, which is ball. Another is a numerical value, which is 3.96. Now the question is, how do I convert the string into a numerical value? Okay, so I need something as numericals. Okay, either it should be as binary or something like that. How do I convert? Here the solution is go for a one-hot encoding. So one-hot encoding is an algorithmic approach. You need not write code for one-hot encoding. Python libraries gives you facility. You can use a library and you can invoke one-hot encoding. And one-hot encoding will convert the data, which is like this, into a numerical value, which is like this. Okay, so the next keyword I'm keeping for your information is one-hot encoding. Now, the last keyword that everybody should be knowing before we step to the next concept is something called as dimensionality reduction. So what is dimensionality reduction? Dimensionality reduction says, if I have this many features, I do not want to have the data to have all these features. Can I reduce my number of features? If I want to reduce my number of features, then I need to create some new features. So example, if I have a mark sheet of a student, I can achieve dimensionality reduction by just using average. I can say, rather than showing the mark sheet, I will say roll number, name, average. So average is a statistical feature. So you can create statistical features or you can create non-statistical features. Non-statistical features in the sense, for example, let's take, I have an image. Let's take, for example, I'll show you an example here. I'm showing you a data set like this. Now in this image that you see as an object, I want to draw a region and see what is the area of the region. So area becomes a statistical feature, for which you need to write your own formula here, right? So you can build your own features or you can use existing statistical features. Now for all of you to understand how to know about statistical features, I'll show you this link. Madam, are you all able to see?
Sir?
Ma'am, are you able to see?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Now, in this, you can see in the left side, there is something called as statistical tools. Now, if you come to the right side, this is a very popular website, xuru.org. The right side, you will find something called as descriptive statistics. Now, this descriptive statistics, what it will do is, if you give columns of data, it will create the statistical values and populate. For example, I'll show you here. So this is assumed to be one of the feature from a given data. As you can see here, I can take one column from here and I can put it. So once I give this, right, and I give a calculate, then automatically it will calculate all the statistical features and keep it in front of you. So for my knowledge, I would understand that I got one new statistical feature which is called as mean, right? I got one more feature which is called as median. Like that, if you come down, you can see most of the statistical features. Now, why is this being generally done? This is for creating new features. In a way, we want to achieve dimensional reduction. The second advantage is we want to know about the type of distribution in the data. Now, this says automatically for this feature set that you're given, the distribution is normal and the distribution value is having a confidence of 17.06. This leaves you some questions about what is confidence level, all that. Please go back to theory and refer yourself. Right? Now, this is first thing which I want you to know. There are many descriptive statistics. You can have a look at this. Maybe in your free time, please go through and learn. If you are, all of us have studied this in our school times or in the college. Maybe you would have lost touch. Please go back and learn all this. Then the next thing that we are supposed to learn is whenever we have data and we want to understand data, one way is go to statistics and see statistics. The other way of looking at this is we need to look at what type of distribution we can apply. Now look at the statistical tools. If you go to the statistical tools on the right side, you'll find something called as probability distribution. Just come down to the probability distribution. If you scroll down, it will show you all type of distributions that are available. You can see very well on the screen. All type of distributions will be available. Let's take you talk about a Poisson distribution. Let's take for example. Now you say your values that you get is after applying your data, right? You're getting a value like this. This will give you, come back to you with some inference about what you have achieved with the distribution. So this will teach you important factors with respect to probability distributions. Here you will start learning about probability mass function, cumulative distributive functions. This is a very important keyword for you to learn about probabilistic classifiers. For example, when you come down to Bayesian or deep Bayesian neural networks like that, the challenge would be is like you will start seeing keywords like CDF, all that. All that you can learn from this type of distributions. So request everybody, please go to this probability distributions. If you are not conversant with the distribution, click one by one, right? Give the values and see what inference you can get from here. This is second one I'm keeping for your reference. Now, you know what we are trying to do. We are trying to teach you about concepts of labeling. Labeling means class for every feature, rows. You know what is data. Now you know what is labeled data. We've got a class for every row. We know what is prediction. Now, if you look at this, this is what is the fundamental here. We want to classify every data to a respective class. Second, what you see is important thing is something called as regression. What is regression is, see, irrespective of whatever models that you develop, people always ask you a fundamental question. What is the hypothesis that you have arrived? The hypothesis can be understood with an equation saying y equal to mx plus c, just for a layman understanding. So all of us know what is a y equal to mx plus c. It's a line equation. So it gives us an inference saying some points fall above the line, some points fall below the line. So based on the way in which whether it falls above the line or below the line, you start saying whether it is a positive sample or a negative sample. Now how to go about with regression? Let's see here. In this xure.org, there will be a link called as regression tools. Click on this regression tools. It will show you all type of regressions available. Generally, there are two categories of regression. One is normal, that is linear regression, let's take you say. There will be something called as multiple linear. Now let's come to the linear regression here. Now, in this linear regression, it will ask you for pasting the values. So you can provide 2 column values, right? So give your values. This corresponds to the features of your data. So give your values, whatever you want to provide. So I'm giving my values. Once I give my values, now the next step would be is like I go and click on calculate. Once I click on calculate, I will come back with an equation which is similar to what you have seen in your line equation, y equal to mx plus c. But here, the regression equations will give you additional component, which is y equal to mx plus c plus error, right? This error is what you can see as a calculated value for every feature row that you're given. If you look back to your data, I have given 5 rows of data. That means for every row of the data, there will be a calculated value of y equal to mx plus c with the equation. And there will be an error component. This error component will say whether the points, as you see in the slide, right? Each data point corresponds to every row, whether the points fall above the line or below the line. So this gives you an inference saying what type of tuning process that you should do in such a way that the outliers can be reduced. Okay, so this is how regression is seen. For every regression in this web page itself, they'll say you the other type of regressions available. You can look back into this regression part. So when you go back to this regression tool link, there will be something called as multiple linear regression. What is multiple linear regression is when there is more than one feature which is dependent. There you can go for a multiple linear regression. So request the members to please spend some time in learning regressions before you come into the deep learning concepts. The next one is something called as clustering. See, all we want is we want to first classify the data, as I told you. I want to give class labels 0, 1, 2, whatever it is, right? So next what we want to do is we want to say that whether the classes can allow you for prediction. So the prediction is more important because you want to find the anomalies in the given data. Right? What is anomaly? Whichever is abnormal in the data is anomaly. For example, for all our information, if you see the COVID growth, let's take it as 500, 1,000, let's take 2,000, let's take it touches 3,000. For us, 3,000 is very high. It touches 5,000, for example. It's a very high value, right? Okay, so anything which is abnormal in a given data is an anomaly. Now, this is what a deep learning wants. It wants to take an input data, it wants to do some feature engineering, then it wants to use some algorithms which is belonging to deep learning and give you a prediction. Let's see on the right side slide. There's a cat image. Once you give a cat image, deep learning understands it is an image which is a set of rows and columns. Each row corresponding to a column will give you a pixel value, and these pixel values are mapped. Fine. Now, what happens is it learns the features from the given image. Once it learns the features from the given image, then with whatever algorithm that you provide, it can be a convolution neural network or a variant of it, automatically it will be able to predict and say it is a cat image. That means if somebody is giving an image like what you see as a cat here, the deep learning architecture will say with higher accuracy that it is a cat image. Now, the discussion that we have to keep in for inferences, first thing, please understand that deep learning was developed initially for images. So naturally, it will look for data which is a square matrix. Right? If it's a non-square matrix, please pad the values with zeros so that it will not affect the given data. And next is there's a lot of abstraction in the way it learns. For example, if I say I have got two convolution layers, every convolution layer will learn a knowledge from a given data, right? But what deep learning says is if you just give an image, it will automatically learn what is pixels. It will automatically understand that pixels are connected together as edge. It will learn that edges connected is called as region, and then it will be able to predict the given data. So that is what we are calling it as feature engineering. Now, summary what we have seen, we know what is features, feature vector, dimension detection, then we know what is class label, we know what is classification. Now, a deep learning gives you certain keywords. First one is called as filter. What is filter is? Filter is corresponding to a neuron. We have discussed earlier about what is neuron in a given model. You can see from this slide, every input is mapped to a neuron, right? Here also you can see neurons presented, right? So a filter corresponds to a neuron, and every filter will have numbers which is called as weights. I told you W1 to Wn. Then depth of a filter is same as the depth of the input. You'll see what is depth also. Now let's take this as an input. You talk about an RGB image, red, green, blue image. The image is of size 32 cross 32. Since it's an RGB image, it's going to have three matrices, one for red, one for green, and one for blue. And we are going to have a filter. Filter is going to have weights. So let's take our filter, it's going to be 5 cross 5. Again, it is one for red, one for green, one for blue. So it is 5 cross 5 into 3. After you apply the filter on the input, what will be left out is a square matrix of numbers, which is 28 cross 28. Because the filter is 5 cross 5 applied over 32 cross 32. So after you apply the filter on the input, what you will be getting is something called as a feature map, which is called as an activation map. Now, along with this concept, deep learning gives you two operations. One is called as stride and next is called as padding. Stride as such will say how are you going to move the filter on the image. For example, all of you are looking at the screen. Somebody's face is towards the left of the screen or somebody's face towards the right of the screen. You might say, I will have my filter in the center of the screen. That means sometimes or mostly my face is in the center. I want to fix only on the center so that I learn the information. So where do you place your filter is decided based on stride. Okay. The next is padding. Padding, as I told you, wherever there are empty locations and or you want to convert a non-square matrix into a square matrix because deep learning takes only an image, please fill it as zeros and you can call it as something called as padding. Right? These are variants of the neural network, RCNN, fast RCNN, are variants of the deep learning model. The next one is forward pass and backward pass. See, this is very vital in deep learning. What a deep learning model says is, you give me a set of inputs, right? I go through a forward pass. So every input is having a weight. I learn, right? Knowledge is learned. And in the output, I'll be predicting something, right? So my prediction will have a value, but there is an actual value that is supposed to come. So that's the difference between a predicted and an actual value, right? So that will give me something called as loss. If the loss is going to be high, what I can do is I can ask the deep learning model to go back in the back propagation model and again go for the next epoch, right? That's the next iteration. And in the next iteration, what it will do is all the weights will not be used. Please understand this. This is very important in deep learning. All weights will not be used. Whichever weights are contributed to the knowledge learning, that weights alone will be used and it goes in the forward. Again, it calculates the loss. Loss is the difference between the expected and the actual. Again, if the loss is not going to be reduced, it goes again. This keeps on going again and again until it reaches a minimal amount of loss. That means your loss has to become minimal. That's the conclusion here. The point at which the loss is minimal, there the model stops. That means you now have a model for you to evaluate. And that model can be used for predicting a given input data. Now, people usually ask a question, how do you say the model is right? Answer is, if the loss is minimal, then the model is right. The second answer would be it depends on the environment that you can get it. For example, some people say I have more amount of data. Then in that case, your model is more accurate. Some people say I have less amount of data, then your model is less accurate. Or the other way around. Some people will say my computer is very powerful. I'm running on a GPU. It ran for 3 days, so my model is perfect. Some people will say I have a lower system configuration. I ran for only 20 epochs. That means 20 times the model has gone in the forward and backward. Finally, whatever loss I got, with that I concluded. There your model may be less accurate. So there is no direct answers to it. It depends on the data that you have. And second thing is it depends on the infrastructure on which you run your model. Now, when you look at the slide, now you should be able to understand what is forward pass. Whenever it's going in the forward direction, it calculates y, right? And it automatically will be able to say what is loss. If the loss is high, it automatically goes in the backward propagation. When the backward propagation, as I told you, all weights will not be used. The weights will be updated. And it goes again in the forward direction and calculates a loss. This keeps on increasing with the number of epochs until your model is accurate. So what is accuracy is your choice, because in your application, you may look at a specific level of accuracy. Once a deep learning runs, then it gives you some performance parameters. How do you say your model is correct? Now we will first look at machine learning. If you are going to machine learning, then in that case, every sample that you have in your data can be called as a positive sample or a negative sample. So what is positive, what is negative sample? If a person says, I have built a model to test COVID, just given a blood sample. I'm just saying an example, okay? Given a blood sample, I can know whether the person has a COVID or not. Then there are two answers to it. It's a positive sample or a negative sample. So I have got lot of test samples now. Then that means I have learned more about the positive samples, right? So a problem always asks you a question, how much are you intelligent. So answer to that is the more input that you get, the more you are intelligent. So that means the more number of blood samples are collected, the more number of positive samples about COVID is learned. Now, what is negative sample to it? Anybody who doesn't have a COVID, right? Okay. So your model should have more amount of positive samples and should have less amount of negative samples. Even as I told you for the COVID, it will be the case. So it depends, right? Some applications will always say positive samples as in a different context and negative samples as a different context. I'm talking about COVID means somebody who's tested for COVID is a positive sample. Somebody who's not having a COVID, it's a negative sample. So given positive and negative samples, now our question is like, we want to say a person is given a blood test, so he is having COVID. Let's take for example, if the blood sample is properly tested and says that he's having a COVID, then that case it's a true positive. A person is not having a COVID generally, blood test is taken, tested for COVID. It says no, he's not having a COVID case. It's called as true negative. So that's what you can see in the slide, which is TP, which is true positive, and another one is called as true negative. The complement to that will be false positive, and next is false negative. With this, you'll be able to get the performance parameters, which is precision, recall, accuracy, all that. So all models need not use all these parameters. For example, if you want to have a face detection system, just somebody's face is seen, the door opens, then that case you want to detect a face. That's all. So there you go for precision recall. Suppose you say only when your face is detected and it is correctly detected, the door should open, right? Then that case you need not go for precision recall. You can go for accuracy. Okay. So next one. Once again.
Sir?
Yes, madam. 1 second, ma'am. 1 second.
Oh, okay.
So all these performance parameters need not be used for all the models. Now let's come to the next approach where we talk about deep learning. When you come to deep learning, there are some performance parameters which are different. For example, you can see a parameter called as false discovery rate, mean average precision, top 1 error rate, top 5 error rate. All these are important parameters when you come to deep learning. Now this slide is for you to understand about the important parameters for deep learning. Now these are the stages in deep learning. First stage is collecting the data. As I told you, data is very important. The second one is all type of pre-processing that you want to do in the data. Example of pre-processing is removing the noise is an example of pre-processing in a given data. The next one is what are the parameters you want to set. There are different parameters that we set to the deep learning. One set of parameters are more related to the normal parameters that you see in neural network. Some set of parameters are not normal parameters. They are more related to the parameters for the deep learning itself. Ma'am, can you see the Word document? Hello? Madam?
We can see that.
Okay, right, fine.
We can
now
see, sir.
We can, yeah, thank you. If you look at this architecture, let's take LeanIt for example. This is performance parameters, precision recall, mean average precision, F1 score, top 1 error rate, all that are performance parameters. Now, if you look at the parameters, which can be called as hyperparameters, example is learning rate, momentum, optimizer, activation function, all this. So for your model, please decide what type of parameters you're going to have, and that parameters are called as normal parameters and hyperparameters. Now comes the question about normal parameters and hyperparameters. If you say normal parameters, it is more related to, let's take number of neurons, number of convolution layer, number of pooling layers are all normal parameters. Hyperparameters means a parameter which can change. For example, learning rate is not fixed, it will get changed, right? It's an example of hyperparameter. So once you give your parameter assignment, then you can tune your model and you can give your stopping criteria. The stopping criteria is more related to the loss. As I told you, if the loss is going to be minimal, then you can make your model to stop. Or otherwise, people usually use approaches to say that my model can stop because there are other parameters that I have improved in my model. Right? So last part is what you see is something called as visualization. Coming to tools, there are many tools in deep learning. The common tools which I usually suggest is you can go for Keras with Theano, or you can go for Keras with TensorFlow, or you can go for other tools which is more built for deep learning. For example, MATLAB is also a good tool for you to work with deep learning. So choice of deep learning tool depends on the application that you work. The next is the data that you want. Data, as I told you, you can work with different data sets. As I told you in the beginning, it can be an outlier data set, or it can be a data set from Caltech, or it can be a data set from video, or you can create your own data set for you to work, which can be an Excel file or a CSV file. Now, I have spoken to you on statistical features. Now let's take through an input with respect to a URL. 1 second. When you look at the online tools for you to work, there are many tools for you to work on deep learning. I want you to have a quick look on this one because this gets you a feel of what a deep learning does. What I'm showing you is a playground which is built on TensorFlow. Now you can see on the top left side, there's something called as run. There'll be something called as epoch. So before we start with this, let's come to this important keyword, which is called as data. There's an online link, so everybody can always access. So here you can see data. They'll give you different representations for a data. You can click on that. It's just for you to understand how a deep learning model works. Then the next thing it will ask you is, what is the ratio of training to test data? As I told you, the more amount of data that you have, the better the model is. So we will assume that we'll have more amount of training data, right? That means the training data can be 70, test data can be 30. This is an ideal answer. 70 can be the training, testing can be 30. Noise is always prevalent in the data. You can always have different type of noise. One common noise is Gaussian noise, which is prevalent in the data. Next is batch size. That means how many rows of data you want to take for running. So the batch size can be 10, 15, 20 like that. So here I give it as 17, for example, because sometimes people go for a batch-based learning. Then next one is what is the learning rate that you want to fix. You can fix your learning rate that you want. Then next is you can say what is the activation function. This is other important hyperparameters. So common activation function is ReLU. So I'm fixing it as ReLU. I can say what type of regularization I want to apply. So I'm saying I will apply L1 type regularization. Then I want to say what is the regularization rate. You can fix your regularization rate. Any problem will actually fall into these two categories. Either it is a regression problem or a classification problem. So I'll call it as a classification problem here. Now, if you come down, now you can see the layout. Here I can say what is my features. So here it says 2 features, for example. I can have third feature also. As I start clicking on it, it will start connecting to the neurons, right? I can add the number of neurons, right? Neurons are more related to the data. So I can add neurons to my model. Plus, I can increase the number of hidden layers. As I told you, the more the hidden layer, the abstraction level is high in the learning. I can increase my hidden layer. So when I start adding, you can see here the hidden layers also will start increasing. Okay, right? This is an UI layout. This is for understanding deep learning model. Right side, what you can see is loss. As I told you, loss corresponds to the difference between expected and actual. You will have 2 types of loss. One is called as a training loss and next is test loss. You want to have the loss as much as minimal. So now it is showing your loss as equal 0.5, 0.5. Now what I can do is I can start going here and I start clicking on run. Now please look at this features and you can look at the output, right? You can see some changes. Now the data visualized is like this after classification. Now I'm running with the model. When I run my model, you can see it is going in the forward. You can see the epoch. Epoch means 1 forward, 1 backward. You can see the loss also changing on the right side. Okay, right? And this, as it goes with time, what happens is it starts changing the nature of loss values also. At one point, the loss will become minimal. The point at which the loss becomes minimal, the model will stop. So the information I'm keeping it to you all is like, one is you should know about what is learning rate. You should be knowing about activation function. the type of regularization, what is regularization rate, then you should do some understanding on the data. You can see the loss changing, right? You can see the loss values changing. The next is what is the amount of data you're having. Second, how much you want to have training to testing. So training can be 70%, testing can be 30%. So are you looking at some algorithms for noise handling in the given data, like missing values, all that? Then are you going for batch-wise turning? So this will keep on running and it will stop at one point. So this, I want you to just have a look for you to know about how a deep learning model generally works. So deep learning tools can be chosen based on your choice. MATLAB is also a good one to start, but as you come down, you can go to other algorithms. The next is deep learning architecture. All architectures are not built for all type of data. For example, if you talk about object detection, people will say, please go to YOLO, as it is a very good architecture, right? So you can use other architectures also, like CNN is there, RNN is there, ImageNet is there. All that architectures also you can try to choose for deep learning. So in our journey with deep learning, so we have developed one tool and with my students, which we are calling it as metadata. And this we have presented at a conference also recently. So this tool, the advantage of this tool is we want people to work with data with less effort. So that was a requirement from the tool side. So this tool has some characteristics. So what the tool will do is, this tool has a characteristic of understanding data first. So it can give you visualization also back. This tool is built on Python with TensorFlow, with Visual Studio, C#.NET. So what the tool can do is it can actually take some data, it can do some pre-processing, it can do some feature engineering on it, it can do a data analysis also. I'll show you what it does. So the tool characteristics are very complex in the sense like it can give you special aspects like given some data, if you have the data with certain number of features, then what it can do is it can do a data pre-processing first. So when it says data pre-processing, what it can do under pre-processing is it can show you first the complete layout of the data, right? Complete layout of the data it will be able to show. Then next thing what it can do is it can give you what is the number of features that you want to create. For example, if I have 5 features, I want to have totally 3 features converted, that is also possible. So this we are doing it with the algorithms which are either with PCA, principal component analysis, or we are using autoencoders. So this tool is in the prototype level. We are working on it to make it more stable for an academic community. So we'll share it on the website as it goes complete. Last to conclude is like what are the different problems that you can try with deep learning. One problem still it's open as COVID is a very important data which people are analyzing with deep learning. I usually say to the people as a very good suggestion, if you have a problem to solve, let's look at the problem whether it is a solved problem or unsolved problem. For example, a solved problem is face detection, right? Today you open every camera, it can show you a square showing your face. It's a solved problem, it's 15, 20 years back solved problem. But if you look at the COVID problem, for example, a COVID started coming in December, as much as we know from the sources. The first model that was created for COVID, using deep learning, let's take it as in December, is very popular because it is an unsolved problem in December. Now, if you ask, it is slightly unsolved problem because many papers have come with deep learning. So please look at the problems, whether it's a solved or unsolved problem. If it is an unsolved problem, then it has got a lot of attraction and effort of deep learning to that will always get an advantage for you. But it's a solved problem. Please look at the challenges in the solved problem. Let's look at it. For example, face detection, for example. Everybody's faces are detected when the camera is open. But let's take there's a lot of noise. That means let's take somebody's walking on the road, but there's heavy rain, right? The camera will it be able to pick up the data of the face of the person and remove the raindrops and automatically say this person is so and so. So that's still a challenge. So that's one of the challenge in face detection. And let's take it's little dark. So one of your person is walking on the road, partial face is seen, right? Light is seen on the face only on one side. So you see one side of the face, the other side is not seen. How do you work on it? It's a face detection problem. So you can build deep learning for it. The next is malpractice detection. Now, with the way things going on, classroom exams, teachers have been taking exams and so on. But the way systems are going to online, e-learning models, somebody is looking at a camera and trying to answer to a question. So is he doing malpractice or not? Does he have any other screen opened on the window? With that, is he able to answer? So malpractice detection is still an open challenge now. Next is healthcare data. COVID is very best example for healthcare data, but otherwise you can look at other problems also in healthcare with the doctor support. Network intrusion is one problem that I've been exploring with my team. So I have a project also going with IBM. So what do we do in that is like packets going around a network. Can we quickly say whether the packet is carrying some suspicious information? That can be either a malware, virus, or it can be some other data which might affect the network. So it falls into network intrusion problem. So that it's still open. People can look at network intrusion with deep learning. The next one is agriculture. Precision agriculture is suitable for these situations because it is like if you have a small land, if you can have sensors, can you actually collect some data and give some guidance about the soil and the water level that should be given for the land. And same thing if you say I'm a owner of, let's take not one land, I have 50 acres. So I cannot visit all the 50 acres every day, right? So if I have sensors, with the sensors, can I do some monitoring? Then there you can look at deep learning as a good solution. The next is call taxi booking. This I want to say to people as a very good use case because any deep learning model that you develop or ML model that you develop always needs to be acceptable by the use case of the person. Use case of the person is the call taxi owners, right? So for example, if you have a taxi you want to book, so let's say one taxi you are seeing 1 kilometer away and another taxi you're seeing is 5 kilometers away. So your general thinking is if I book a taxi, I'll get a taxi which is 1 kilometer away, closer to me. But it's normally not like that because there are other factors to call taxi booking also. Every taxi driver always gets an incentive based on the amount of distance that they travel. So the winning scenario is the taxi drivers, they drive, they want to travel more kilometers and they want to get the incentive. But the taxi owners in the software, they will always ask an interesting use case. Okay, make sure that the person drives, but make sure that he's not getting incentive also. So let's take your incentive will come when you touch 500 kilometers. The software will make sure that you're not touching 500 kilometers. That means based on the taxi bookings, it will be given to the other person who is distant from you. That means, as I told you, if you're booking a taxi, one taxi is 1 kilometer away and another taxi is 5 kilometers away. Maybe the person who is 5 kilometers away can get the taxi booked. Right? The booking will go to the driver because the person who is 1 kilometer away is closer to the 500 kilometers incentive. So the software might not be willing to book. So there's a lot of analytics and there's a lot of business use case that goes behind every deep learning model. So in summary, what I have kept for you before you for discussion is machine learning and deep learning. And I have given you inputs on why ML is important, why a deep learning is important, what is uncertainty in a given data. Then we have looked at the deep learning architecture. We have said what is feature engineering, keywords with respect to any data, calling it as feature, dimensionality reduction, class label, classification, single class, multi-class, all that has been clarified to you. And I have said you what is parameters and hyperparameters in deep learning. Last, I have given you some applications where you can take through deep learning. That's it from my side. So my compliments to the members for organizing and thanks to my guide. In fact, my PhD guide was S.N. Shivanandam sir, formerly Professor Computer Science with PhD Tech. He's my guide and guru. So he only brought me into this field of machine learning in my PhD. Then after that, I have been trying to struggle to get into different real-time applications and see how machine learning and deep learning can be employed. So thanks to my guide and my credits to him always. With this, I conclude my session. I leave to the people to have their queries. Thank you, madam, and thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. It's time for vote of thanks. Greetings to all. On behalf of St. Mother Teresa Engineering College, it gives me an immense pleasure to take this opportunity to offer vote of thanks. First of all, I want to thank God Almighty for helping us to conduct this wonderful webinar. Next, I would like to thank our resource person, Dr. T. Sendil Kumar sir, for spending his valuable time and sharing his knowledge with us in his busy schedule. Thank you, sir. Next, I would like to thank our principal sir for his continuous support and guidance. Thank you, sir. Next, I extend my special thanks to our head of the department, Mrs. Bhimajan Sagin ma'am, for her constant support and cooperation. Thank you, ma'am. Finally, heartfelt gratitude to all the participants for their active participation and making this program very successful one. Thank you all.
So thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir.